All right, recording started, and this is the November 22nd, 2023 SIG Developer Experience meeting. So this is our first meeting since shipping 1.14 a couple weeks ago now, I suppose. So we want to spend some of the time today talking about what we want to do in 1.15 and make sure we're all aligned on the priorities and stuff like that. I don't think that's going to be a long conversation unless we want to get into any specific details of this. So if folks have other agenda items or things they wanted to get into, then we could definitely talk about that. Hey, Stephen, would you be able to kind of talk through a little bit of the migration tool stuff? Because that's something we want to, include in the CLI in 1.15. Do you want to would you be able to walk us through that a little bit today on the agenda too?
Yeah, I can. Yeah,
Okay.
let me get it set up.
Yeah, cool. I'll put you at the end then. So this is not going to work there like that. Well, cool. Nice. All right. So yeah, let me just kind of talk through real quick for everybody the 1.15 roadmap and priorities. Nick and I met recently on this and then kind of chatted through with Bassam and Oren as well. So I feel like we've got a good understanding of what we want to focus on for this milestone. So, I mean, the overall theme of improving the authoring time experience has not changed at all. That's been the theme the entire time. We want to be focusing on building things that will accelerate the effort of a platform engineer when they are building, writing their compositions and building their platform, and help them get to a successfully built platform more quickly. So that's the theme, is that when you're authoring and building your platform, we want that experience to continue to be improved. So I'd say the big change here, though, is that before we shipped 1.14, the plans that we had for 1.15 were tackling the authoring time experience by building a language server that would give you, feedback and like immediate errors and linting and stuff like that while you're in a IDE like Visual Studio Code. Now, the reason I think that something we didn't know before 1.14 shipped is how useful the render functionality would be, and how much of an improvement to the authoring time experience that by itself is providing for people. We've gotten a ton of really good feedback for people finding render to be quite productive and useful for them. And so after talking it through with Nick, the effort of creating a language server did not seem to have the right payoff. I captured that in this linked issue here, all of the details there, but the TLDR of it was that building a language server properly would be a huge cost. And then it actually has somewhat limited returns now based on the functionality that Render is providing for us already, and the improvements we can make to Render to make that even more useful for authoring time and validation sort of stuff. So it makes some sense to lean more heavily into Render and have that be the core provider of our authoring time experience. So yeah, there's all those thoughts were kind of captured in a little bit more detail in this comment that's linked in the agenda doc, but that's the gist of it though. So then that puts our top priorities here. Those are all captured as the features in the 1.15 epic for developer experience 4654. So I'll walk you through a couple things here. The top features here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are listed in priority order. So we can, the biggest impact and most desirable features are listed right here in this list here. So that's very clear what we think we should be working on. If you wanted a different view of this epic, there's a link here that takes you to the roadmap board, and it's sorted by priority. There's underlying P0, P1, P2 fields there. So you can see this list as well if you want to kind of think about what to be working on during this milestone while we're tackling things. But all right, so the top 5 features here. So leaning further into render is the way that we are going to provide validation for when you are authoring and doing and you're in that developer iteration cycle on building your platform and your compositions and everything. So Nick was able to write it up last night that the approach we want to take here is going to focus on the inner dev loop, the dev iteration cycle, but also catering to folks that are building their initial platform. So you don't already have a control plane that's out there running. You don't have something that you could validate against. So being able to facilitate that scenario as well when you're just getting started with Crossplane and you want to start building your first compositions, etc. That we would do. Now, the exact solution here, I don't think is set in stone. We can kind of figure out what the right thing to do is here, but the idea is to facilitate and streamline that experience for the platform engineer where, optionally they can use render to validate the resources that are spitting out on the other side that are the output of the render, to validate those, and do that by having some sort of essentially API server that we spin up, that we have running, that could do all of the schema validation for us, the validation webhook stuff for us, the extension validation stuff, all that jazz. So basically, reusing the Kubernetes machinery to provide accurate and complete validation. So we'll definitely need to think through how best to build something like that. But I think I totally agree with Nick that being able to use control plane machinery is the most effective and accurate way to build complete validation. I totally agree with that. Any questions so far on that priority? Since that is the top listed feature we have in the milestone here.
My concern just now is like, if we create a kind cluster and add install providers, there will be a waiting time between the providers getting ready and so on. So we'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Low-road, what I was imagining too is that, there's, and which is where I'm not totally sold on that exact solution yet, but I was imagining, some sort of managements, like lifecycle management of this validation control plane that we're managing for them as well. So for instance, like amortizing that cost across multiple runs of render, like, spin it up once and then have that running in the background for then fast, render cycles. So we don't spin it up and tear it down every single time, essentially, because that would be inefficient, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the solution will be somewhere around that, because I saw that there's also a note down that's like making something custom that just takes the CRDs would be ineffective use of time when you already have all this, all this done, right? So
yeah, agreed.
We'll see.
Do we also want to support a long-running cluster validation instead of creating a local kind cluster? Maybe we can also provide a kubeconfig to access to a real cluster.
Yeah, I think I think the initial focus will be on the scenario of folks that are just getting started and don't have a control plane, and focus on that, and then as a later phase, or an additional thing later on, getting into that could make sense too. Yeah, but starting with I'm a platform engineer trying to get successful with Crossplane. I don't have anything yet. Please help me get successful is the main focus. There's lots of those people. All right. Then the other focuses we have here is making X-Package init more automated, because essentially right now what it does is it's a git clone operation, essentially, where it takes one of the template repos, brings it down, and then you've got a bunch of manual steps to change the namespaces or the package import paths, or whatever, all that sort of stuff. So being able to customize your template or the repo that we're scaffolding for you in some way, so that you don't have to do all those manual steps, will be a nice improvement there. And we got validation on that as well during the what is it called, the the Contrib Fest that we did in Chicago at KubeCon, where folks essentially had to go through this experience there. And so a lot of them, they would initialize their scaffolded repo there. They would have the template repo basically like locally. They would start doing development work, and then a lot of people kind of fell off of getting it right, like the right things to go manually update and change and stuff like that. So we saw hands-on, in-person people failing to do that successfully. So streamlining that and getting it into a position where exactly what they need to then only focus on their logic is going to be a win for sure. Yep. And then also Trace is super useful so far, but it doesn't understand packages. And we have historically had many questions about, I'm trying to install a package, it's not healthy, or it's where's the CRDs, where's this, where's that. So being able to teach Trace about the package manager's resource model as well, so it can walk package revisions and resources that are supposed to be installed and all that sort of stuff, to be able to paint a picture that shows what's happening, and also the kind of root cause of why a package might not be installing or upgrading or whatever, will be quite useful. Stephen has worked already, and he'll show us he'll walk us through this later on in the agenda, but some tooling to do migration of Crossplane types, like controller config to runtime config, and old style patch and transform compositions to using function-based patch and transforms. Stephen's already written some migration code around that. So wrapping that up and having a first-class citizen experience around that will only help people to adopt functions and get rid of and move on from controller figs more easily. And then finally, top. Is you have a question?
Yeah, I have something to add. During this hackathon, I've been working on a migration tool for converting the old style patch and transform compositions to Go templating function style compositions.
Ooh.
So this has been asked from Piotr a couple of weeks ago, and I started around that time and then gave a break about the topic. But since we are already considering adding a migration tool for the new patch and transform function, maybe we can also extend the functionality to cover the Go templating one as well, because I think that's another pretty useful function that community
cool.
started to contribute. So
nice, Ezgi. I didn't know you were working on that at all. That's super cool to hear that. So yeah, and I'm curious where we will land on like how we expose within this migration tools, like how will we expose the different options and things you can do and make them easy to understand and find what they're looking for and stuff like that. But yeah, there's multiple migration options that we were already thinking in there. There's another useful one right there, like that seems to make sense as well. So yeah, awesome, that's really cool. All right, and then the last feature here is something like the top command, where you can, this is a little bit interesting, I think, because we have historically had some sort of observability story in Crossplane, and by that I mean you've got to turn on the built-in metrics in Prometheus integration, and then you have to we expose the controller runtime metrics. Basically, we don't have higher level Crossplane specific metrics that would give higher level insight into how Crossplane itself is doing, but there's some sort of observability story there. It will only get better over time, especially with the special interest group we have around observability, but we need a place to start where folks just essentially streamline the experience where, hey, I've got Crossplane running. I need to understand if it's okay, if it's healthy. What resources is it using? Is it going slow? Is it going fast? Like, what the heck's going on? Some sort of exposure of that, of streamlining that and make that one command to run, Crossplane top, and you will get some insight into what your control plane is doing and if it's healthy and such. What that actually means, don't know at all yet, what we would be exposing there. But right now it's, I don't even think the docs really give you a good idea of how to go and get observability stuff out of Crossplane. So streamlining it here would be quite nice. Then there's also, you know, there's a whole, but there's like another section here of bugs and small improvements, etc. These are fairly ordered priority wise as well, but none of these should be to the same depth and you know, scope as the high level top 5 features that we have here. So that's everything we're thinking about in 1.15. Any more questions that come up from that here? Here's the TLDR list. All right. So, you know, I think maybe some parting words here is that we have fairly clear priorities defined, but there's a lot of things here, folks. Bless you, Eski. We have a lot of we have a lot of things here that are not defined from a design and implementation perspective. So I would definitely urge the group here to write out sort of what our approaches are going to be. I think that there's maybe 1 or 2 things need a 1-pager, but I imagine we can get pretty far with, you know, just writing out like a, you know, a couple paragraphs as a comment on each one of these issues for, hey, this is the path I'm going to take. This is what I'm thinking about how to build it from a high level perspective, and just get alignment amongst the group here for how we should be going about implementing these. I don't think it's got to be a strict process too much, but starting with a proposal, like as a couple paragraphs on as a comment on each issue will kind of help us figure out A, what we're going to do, and B, if there's contention about it and we need to do deeper design work. But let's just stay in touch on all that stuff. All right, Piotr is not here because he has a conflict today, but he wanted to share that he got a bit of a start on writing some top command functionality. So he is, by doing so, he has claimed ownership of that feature as well. That's always one way to do it, is just start writing the code. So Piotr has a repo here under his GitHub account right now for Crossplane-top. And I haven't gotten a chance to run this hands-on myself just yet, but essentially it is, oh, dog, hold on. So this is essentially, I think there's a, here we go, here's an output for it. So it's a bit essentially doing like looking at the Crossplane related pods and then exposing CPU and memory stuff from them. That is useful, and that is one aspect of what we would want to show for folks with the full command tier. So this is a great start to kind of give a little bit of insight into resource usage, but then, you know, Piotr will be able to take this and extend it to add more things, you know, like insight into metrics and, you know, like all the controllers and I don't know, like their work queue links or whatever, something like that. So there's more to do beyond this, but this is really cool to see this already started before the milestones really even getting some momentum going. So kudos to Piotr for that if you watch us the recording. All right, and then I wanted to check in with this group here. So Lovro and I set this meeting time, this recurring meeting time for the SIG in the 1.14 milestone when we were focusing on it, and what worked well for us. So I wanted to check in with folks, and probably Ezgi, this is most pointed at you, since I know you're going to be heavily invested in developer experience stuff for 1.15. Does this meeting time work good for you recurring as well, or are there considerations we should take to think of a different time to include you better?
No, it's okay.
Oh, sweet. I don't know, that was easy. All right, any other then complaints, not complaints, any other like feedback or suggestions on the time that doesn't work for anybody here, or we're looking okay? Bro, with you, you still okay here?
Yeah, I'm okay because like we can't make it earlier because of folks from the US, so it's okay. But sometimes I'll probably be with baby in my hands. Just FYI.
Perfectly acceptable.
Can we make the baby mandatory?
Yeah.
Yeah, or start assigning some issues.
It's time.
All right. Yeah, exactly. Freeloader. Cool. Okay, that's great to hear. Then we'll keep this time here, and so we don't have to change anything. And then next agenda item we had was Stephen giving us a bit of a walkthrough for what he's already done with migration tools and the head start we've gotten on that in this milestone too. So Stephen, I will stop sharing so you can go ahead and help us see stuff on your side.
All right, I'll share my screen. Let's see here. And folks, tell me if you can see my screen.
Yep, I see a little split
Okay.
screen between browser and code.
Yeah, so this is a tool called Crossplane Migrator, and it's written in a similar way as the existing Crossplane Crank CLI. So it's using like Kong and it has the same similar directory setup. So I'm hoping it'll be easier to migrate or merge into the top level Crossplane CLI. It does two things. It takes the existing controller configs, which are a V1 Alpha 1 feature, and it converts them to a deployment runtime config. So this will take the YAML and rewrite it. And then it'll take existing compositions and it will write them to basically use functions, right? So in order to use this, you're going to have to, install a function in your system too. So that's basically it. I cut a release for it just so that we could get more testing. We actually have several people have been using this for the last few weeks, so we've caught some bugs and some things that we're missing. It's starting to feel a little more solid in general. So that's where we are right now. Yeah, basically, and I could do a quick demo here. There's two options. There's new deployment runtime, which basically creates a dynamic deployment runtime config, and then the other one is a pipeline composition. So we could go take a look at that and see what it does. Let's see here. So right now it's just a Go binary. So if I do something like run Crossplane Migrator, it'll just come back with a help. And then what we could do here is we could say here, like just a quick example is, I have this controller config, and this has things like memory and environment and secrets and args and things like that. So these are all in the top level controller config. But in the deployment runtime config, a lot of these things are put into different parts. They're put into either a service account template or the deployment template. So there's a lot of nesting going on. So what we could do here is I could do Crossplane Migrator, new deployment runtime. And then we can just do this input. Oh, sorry. Let me get my argument set here. We'll just do this. And then we'll just say the input file. You could also echo things into here. Right, and it's going to come back with a deployment runtime config. And if you could see here that it's actually going to have like the spec containers. It's going to have the right name for the container too, because we have the container needs to be called like package registry. So it'll just update it and you could start using this. So that's the first one. Just making sure that everything looks there. The other thing too to keep in mind with this is that if you're going to use a custom service account name, earlier controller configs used to create this account for you, the reconciler within Crossplane, but going forward, you're going to have to create it yourself. Crossplane won't manage it. So
it's Stephen, it kind of jogged my memory a little bit too, but not well enough. So hopefully you know this. If I recall correctly, there is some almost implicit behavior with controller config, like you annotations. I think maybe it was setting annotations at the top layer of the controller config, or setting annotations like in the deployment template or something like that, like would get propagated down into either service accounts or deployments that it creates, etc. Is all that behavior kind of reconciled here as well, where like the annotations get put on the right places and stuff like that you know of? Or I obviously don't know well what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, the question was, if you added annotations here, it would be added to like the service account and some other parts.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
If we look at the generated here, you can see the service account and the service template both have it. So I'll see. I don't know if the deployment, and the deployment has it too. So it'll propagate it. It'll propagate it out. So yeah, there's just like a lot of little code like that to write the migrator of little corner cases, which is why we're trying to test it outside the Crossplane CLI, just because there's enough little corner cases like that that are hanging around. So yeah, obviously we want people to test it as much as possible and come back with the results. The next one is a pipeline composition. So what I could look here is this is I have a sample composition here. This one, you know, it's a fairly typical composition. It's got VPCs and everything else. And what we want to do is we want to rewrite this into function patched and transform. So Crossplane migrator. So we're going to do new pipeline composition. We just do an input here, and we could do what's it, composition network. And we can put this to a file. We could just say test.yaml or something, right? It doesn't exist there. Right, so we're going to write this to this file here, and we can just take a look at this. And what this will do is it will change it. It'll create mode pipeline, and then you can actually configure this name, because if you install Crossplane via configuration, it'll change the function name and have the org in front of it. So you could customize the name, and then it'll just come through and it'll just move things. It's going to add a composite field path if the patch is not defined. So that's one thing that it will do. Also, for certain types of patch types, the type is required. I don't know if we have it here, but like this here, this type string. So it will add a couple missing patch that are now required in 1.14. So this generally works too. We have a few people using it. And I've actually applied this to a live composition, and all the resources moved over without any problem. So I was a little shocked myself. I don't recommend it to anybody, but it looks like it's possible that you could just apply this to a running composition, and everything will work. So yeah, so that's the functionality.
And then Stephen, the because the composition itself doesn't define, you know, like the resource refs and whatnot, right? So like the composition was updated to go from, you know, old patch and transform style to a pipeline using functions in the patch and transform, and the resulting, you know, resources that composition would output matched well enough to such that the composition machinery then said, okay, cool, yeah, this composite resource already has, you know, resource refs for these same resources, and everything was cool. Nice.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the other thing it adds to is
it's
not here yet, but it actually, if you don't have a name, because the name is required now, it'll actually like generate based on the kind and the index. So like if this route table wasn't named here, it'd probably be like route table association and then the index and the composition that it's at, like, you know, 10 or something.
Right.
So,
do you, and then Stephen, could you go all the way to the end just to see how it closes itself off here?
right connection. Yeah, it's alphabetical.
Okay.
So that's something we've thought about too. Like everything else in YAML, can we have ordered fields? Because it's not how I would do it, but so yeah, I'm thinking about, because I'm actually thinking this is we didn't talk about it here, but I'm actually thinking of like a Crossplane format command, right? That would actually format everything into standards that we like in terms of Crossplane, in terms of indenting and field ordering and everything. But in order to do that, you kind of have to have custom YAML fields. And how does that work with the Kubernetes JSON? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and that kind of relates to, you know, a number of other ideas, Stephen, too, that we've had of, you know, like scaffolding out a configuration package repo, and like just like we do function and provider repos, and then having that like set up with the best practices and like the way that we like things, you know, kind of guiding people along the path to get to, you know, well-written platform, right? And then also, you know, general linting of these things as well too. So all that stuff is definitely related for further functionality that helps you get to a correct you know, platform more quickly.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
It was dope, Stephen. Really, really cool to see this, man. Where, you know, this, I'd say like we've had migration stuff in the past, you know, the less that we're depending upon people to, you know, read the instructions, copy, paste stuff over, get it indented under the right parents, you know, all that stuff. Like that's just, every one of those steps is a chance to, you know, make a mistake and have an error and not have it work correctly. So this automated approach that you've taken the initiative on is really awesome to streamline that and you know, get it accurate as well. So somebody takes their old composition, runs the machinery on it, they've got a new one that is very, very likely to work, which really helps adoption of functions and adoption of new functionality here. So that's super cool to see, and really like super kudos as well for taking the initiative to do this and you know, build it your own too, man.
Thanks.
So yep, okay, cool.
I also want to say, just I love how much enthusiasm is around this DevEx. Like Steven is adding stuff, Piotr is adding stuff. There are people from the community also like contributing. So that's
Wins
awesome.
lover adding stuff.
Oh yeah, there's me. Wait, I had a little. I wanted to show you just a little thing that I'm doing as part of the Hack Week. Can you see my screen?
Oh yeah, dude.
Okay, as part of Hack Week, so those who are not from Aban, we have like a AI themed Hack Week, but I decided to play a bit with the CLI and make it prettier. So
Ooh.
I added some like stuff to make it more clear, like
Progress.
what is going on, like progress
Check
bar
it out.
pushing. There is also like when it's just one package is like thinking.
Thinking.
Yeah, I don't know. It has like little bugs with the debug logs. So I mean, we don't have to add all this stuff, but I'm just like playing with it.
Nice, dude. I like it. I like it, bro. Yeah.
And we have what is this? Let me just. I'm also trying to make the picture here, but it's not working yet. You can see
That popsicle's been out in the sun.
That's
too
a
long,
melting
dude.
popsicle.
yeah, there's something I have to do it. but yeah, I'm like we have a week to do some fun stuff, so I'm trying to do something fun that is maybe not so useful, but will make maybe our CLI feel a bit, more fun to use. So we'll see by the end of the week what I have. But for now,
awesome, dude. Yeah, give it more character, right? Like give it like I mean, the more positive feelings you have when using a tool, like the more positivity you're going to have, like positive sentiment you'll have about the project in general. So that's all useful stuff too.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Makes you
Stefan
feel more
will
like
be very happy.
Stefan, yeah, for sure. Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks for showing that off too, Lovro. Okay, so that's all we had in the agenda itself. Anything else that didn't make it to the agenda for folks? All right. If that's everything, then we can go ahead and call it for this iteration of the meeting here. And then anything that contributors need during, while we're starting on this milestone and we're taking issues and stuff like that, just let me know for anything I can help out with and help with like decisions as well for the user experience, product-based decisions and stuff like that. Just feel free to reach out anytime. Awesome. All right, good to see everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.